I am a failure, hardly noticing whether the sunshine is bright or not, because I have no time. My parents can't provide me with support, my education is not high, and I am alone in the city looking for the future. I've tried many jobs, but none of them hired me. Perhaps no one likes a person who is not good at speaking, doesn't like to communicate, and doesn't show enough capability. For 3 whole days, I only ate 2 pieces of bread. Hunger kept me awake at night. Luckily, I had paid a month's rent in advance, so I could continue to live in that dark basement, without having to endure the exceptionally cold wind in winter. Finally, I found a job, a night shift at the hospital, guarding the morgue. The night at the hospital was colder than I had imagined. The wall lights in the corridor were not lit, and it was very dark everywhere. I could only rely on the little light leaking from the room to see my feet. The smell there was very unpleasant. From time to time, the dead were stuffed into body bags and sent here. We cooperated to help them move into the morgue. It's not a good job, but at least it allows me to afford bread. The free time at night can also be used for learning. After all, not many people are willing to come to the morgue, unless there is a body to be sent or transported away for incineration. Of course, I don't have enough money to buy books yet, and I can't see the hope of saving money. I have to thank my former colleague. If he hadn't suddenly quit, I might not have been able to get even such a job. I dream of rotating to work during the day. Now I always sleep when the sun comes out and get up when the night comes, which makes my body a bit weak and my head occasionally aches. One day, a new body was delivered. I heard from others that this was my former colleague who had suddenly resigned. I was a little curious about him. After everyone left, I pulled out the drawer, quietly opened the body bag. He was an old man, his face was green and white, full of wrinkles, and looked very scary under the very dark light. He didn't have much hair, most of which was white. All his clothes were taken off, and not a piece of cloth was left for him. For such a dead person without family, the movers would definitely not miss the opportunity to earn extra money. I saw a strange mark on his chest, black and blue. I couldn't describe what it looked like. The light was too dark at that time. I reached out and touched the mark, nothing special. Looking at this former colleague, I was thinking, if I keep going like this, when I get old, will I be like him? I told him that tomorrow I would accompany him to the crematorium and personally take his ashes to the nearest free cemetery, so as not to bother those in charge of these things and casually throw them into a river or wasteland. This will sacrifice my morning sleep, but fortunately, it's Sunday soon, and I can make up for it. After saying that, I fixed the body bag and put it back into the drawer. The light in the room seemed to be darker. After that day, every time I sleep, I always dream of a big fog. I have a premonition that something will happen soon, and that sooner or later some things that I don't know if they can be called human will come to find me, but no one is willing to believe me. They think that under such an environment and in such a job, my spirit has become a little abnormal and I need to see a doctor. A male customer sitting in front of the bar looked at the storyteller who suddenly stopped. What happened then? This male customer is in his 30s, wearing a brown coarse cloth coat and light yellow trousers, his hair pressed very flat, with a simple dark round hat beside him. He looks ordinary, just like most people in the pub, with black hair, light blue eyes, not handsome, not ugly, lacking distinctive features, and the storyteller in his eyes is a young man of 18 or 19, with a tall stature, long limbs, the same black short hair, light blue eyes, but with deep features, which can make people's eyes bright. This young man looked at the empty wine glass in front of him and sighed. Then I resigned and returned to the countryside, came here to brag with you. As he spoke, a smile appeared on his face, a somewhat playful smile. The male customer was stunned. Was the story you just told a brag? Laughter erupted around the bar.as. The laughter subsided. A thin middle-aged man looked at the slightly embarrassed customer and said, "Outsider, you actually believe Lumien's story. He tells different stories every day. Yesterday he was a poor guy whose fiancée broke off the engagement due to poverty. Today he has become a morgue keeper. Yes, saying something about 30 years on the east side of the Serenzo River, 30 years on the right side of the Serenzo River, only knows nonsense." Another regular customer of the pub followed. They are all farmers from the large village of Cordu, wearing short coats in black, gray, or brown. The young man called Lumien propped up the bar with both hands, slowly stood up, and said with a smile, "You know, this is not a story I made up, it's all written by my sister. She likes to write stories the most, and she is even a columnist for that novel weekly. After speaking, he turned his body sideways, spread his hands to the foreign customer, and smiled brightly. "It seems she writes really well. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding." The foreign customer named Lane Coase didn't get angry, stood up with him, and responded with a smile, "It's an interesting story. What's your name? Isn't it common sense to introduce yourself before asking others?" Lumien laughed. The foreign customer nodded. "I'm Lane Coase. These two are my companions, Valente and Lilia." The latter sentence refers to a man and a woman sitting next to him. The man is in his late 20s, with a bit of powder on his yellow hair, eyes not too big with a color deeper than light blue, wearing a white vest, blue thin coat and black trousers, clearly well dressed before going out. He looks quite indifferent, not really looking at the farmers and herdsmen around him. The woman seems younger than the two men, with light gray long hair tied into complicated buns, and a piece of white veil. As a hat, her eyes are the same color as her hair, and the look at Lumion is full of undisguised laughter, apparently finding the incident just now amusing. Under the light of the pub's gas wall lamp, this woman named Lilia shows a pretty nose and beautifully curved lips. In such a rural area as Corda village, she is definitely considered a beauty. She is wearing a white pleatless cashmere dress, with a beige short coat and a pair of Marcel boots. There are two small silver bells on the veil and the boots. When she walked into the pub just now, she was jingling all the way, very eye-catching, and made many men look straight at eye in their eyes. This must be the fashionable dress that only big cities like Bangor in the province and the capital Trier have. Lumion nodded to the three foreigners. My name is Lumion Lee, you can just call me Lumion. Lee? Lilia blurted out. What's wrong, is there a problem with my surname? Lumion asked curiously. Lane Coase explained for Lilia, your surname is frightening, I almost couldn't control my voice just now. Seeing the puzzled faces of the farmers and herdsmen around him, he further explained, those who have had contact with sailors and sea merchants all know that there is such a saying on the 5 seas, rather encounter those pirate generals or even kings, than meet a man named Frank Lee. His surname is Lee too. Is he terrifying? Lumion asked. Lane shook his head. I'm not sure, but since there's such a legend, it mustn't be too far off. He then changed the subject, addressing Lumion. Thank you for your story, it's worth a drink. What would you like? A green fairy, Lumion replied without hesitation, settling back into his seat. Lane Coase frowned slightly. Green fairy. Absinthe? I think I need to remind you, absinthe is harmful to the human body. This drink could lead to mental disorders, causing hallucinations. I didn't expect the trend in Triel to have spread here, Lilia added with a smile. Lumion exclaimed, so, the people of Triel also like green fairy. For us, life is hard enough already, we don't need to worry about a little more harm. This drink allows us to relax more. All right. Lane returned to his seat, looking at the bartender. 1 green fairy, and add a spicy heart for me. Spicy heart is a famous fruit brandy. Why not get me a green fairy too? I was the one who told you the truth earlier, and I can tell you exactly what this guy is all about. The lean middle-aged man who had revealed that Lumion told stories every day protested. Stranger, I can tell, you still have doubts about the truth of that story. Pierre, for a free drink, you really are capable of anything. Lumion retorted loudly. Before Lane could make a decision, Lumion added, why can't I tell it myself, that way I can have another green fairy? Because they don't know whether to believe what you say or not. Pierre, the middle-aged man, laughed triumphantly. Your sister's favorite story to tell the children is, The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Those who constantly lie will inevitably lose credibility. All right. Lumion shrugged, watching as the bartender pushed a pale green drink towards him. Lane looked at him, asking, is that okay? No problem, as long as your wallet can cover the cost of these drinks, Lumion replied nonchalantly. Then, another green fairy. Lane nodded. Pierre immediately beamed. Generous stranger, this guy is the biggest prankster in the village, you must keep your distance. 5 years ago, he was brought back to the village by his sister, Aurel, and he hasn't left since. Imagine, he was only 13 then, how could he possibly have worked as a morgue attendant at a hospital? The nearest hospital to us is in Dallery, at the foot of the mountain, and it takes a whole afternoon to get there. Brought back to the village? Lilia asked astutely. She tilted her head slightly, causing a jingling sound. Pierre nodded. Aurel moved here 6 years ago. After a year, she went out and brought back this boy. She said she found him on the road, a homeless child who was about to starve to death, and decided to adopt him. Since then, he has been following Aurel and taking the surname Lee. Even the name Lumion was given by Aurel. I've forgotten what I was originally called. Lumion took a sip of his absinthe, chuckling. It seemed that he was not at all embarrassed or ashamed about his past being revealed in this way. I'm sorry, I didn't know it would turn out this way. Ryan politely apologized to Lumion. Lumion chuckled. Does this warrant another round of green fairy? Without waiting for Ryan's response, he changed the subject. Foreigners, what brings you to Cordu? To buy wool, leather. Many residents of Cordu made their living by shepherding. Ryan breathed a sigh of relief silently, seizing the opportunity to say, we came to visit the parish priest of your village's eternal son, church, Guillaume Benet. But he is neither at home nor in the church. You don't need to mention which church. Cordu has only one. Pierre, who had enjoyed Ryan's free absinthe, kindly reminded. The other locals around the bar drank their drinks. No one answered Ryan's question. It seemed that the name represented some kind of taboo or authority that could not be casually discussed. Lumion took a sip of his drink, thought for a few seconds, and said, I guess I might know where the parish priest is. Do you need me to take you there? That would be great. Laya didn't hesitate. Ryan nodded in agreement. Wait until you finish this drink. All right. Lumion picked up his glass and gulped down the light green liquid. He put down the glass and stood up. Let's go. Thank you very much. Ryan gestured to Lumion as he signaled Valente and Laya to get up. A smile appeared on Lumion's face. No problem, you listened to my story, and I drank your wine. We are friends now, right? Yes. Ryan nodded lightly. The smile on Lumion's face became brighter. He extended his arms, as if to give a hug. At the same time, he warmly said, I'm glad to meet you, my cabbages. Ryan, who was ready to embrace, froze. Cabbages. His expression was both puzzled and awkward. Valente and Laya were the same. It's our affectionate term for friends. Everyone in the Daleridge region knows it. It's been like this for centuries, Lumion explained innocently. Trust me, my cabbages. Laya couldn't help but look around, causing a jingling sound. Pierre and the others nodded one after another, indicating that Lumion was not lying this time. But the smiles on their faces seemed to say that they were happy to see the foreigners struggling with such an intimate nickname. Lumion stroked his chin. Don't you like it? Then I'll change it, also used to call friends. My rabbits, my chicks, my ducklings, my lambs, which one do you like? Ryan's expression became more stiff and Valente frowned. Laya replied with a mix of annoyance and amusement, let's stick with cabbage, at least it sounds more normal. Phew, Ryan breathed a sigh of relief, patted Valente's elbow, and nodded slightly. They all sound like precious things at home. Without waiting for Lumion's response, he turned his body and said to the bartender, check, please, 2 firkins. The bartender glanced at the glasses on the bar.as. Ryan paid. Laya changed the subject. The name Lumion is quite rare. At least it's better than Pierre, Guillaume. Lumion laughed. If you shout Pierre here, at least a third of the people will respond to you. Shout Guillaume again, and another third of the people will respond to you. And this guy? He pointed to the thin middle-aged man who was drinking free wine. His full name is Pierre Guillaume. Laya laughed appropriately, which seemed to get past the topic of cabbage. Before leaving the tavern, Lumion looked back around. What's wrong? Laya asked curiously. Lumion answered thoughtfully, today, not only you 3 foreigners came to the tavern, but also another one came before, but I don't know when she left. What did she look like? Ryan became serious. Lumion recalled, a lady, very temperament, she looked like she was from a big city. I can't describe what she looks like. Do you want me to draw it for you? Can you draw? Laya, who had some understanding of Lumion's nature, asked warily. Lumion laughed, no. Then let's go find the parish priest first. Ryan ended the topic. The night in Corda village had no streetlights, but it was not completely dark. The twinkling stars in the high sky brought tranquil faint light, coupled with the slightly yellow light from the windows of some houses on both sides of the road. The group of 4 walked steadily. Before long, they arrived at the Eternal Sun church located next to the village square. In the slightly dark night, this most magnificent building in the village seemed to blend into the night, slightly hazy. We've been here, there's no one. Valente, who had been silent and indifferent, frowned. Lumion laughed. No one at the front door doesn't mean there's no one else. During the conversation, he led Ryan and the others around the front of the church to the area near the cemetery. Here was a deep brown wooden door. Before Lane could knock, Lumion reached out and fiddled with the lock. With a creak, he opened the side door. Isn't this rather impolite? Lane frowned. Leah nodded in agreement. We're here to visit the parish priest, not to confront him. All right then. Lumion was very open to correct suggestions. He closed the wooden door and knocked gently. Hello, is anyone there? If you don't answer, I'm coming in. His voice was low, as if he were muttering to himself in the night. The church was silent. The next second, Lumion opened the door again and pointed inside. Let's go. Lane originally wanted to refuse, but looking at the profound darkness behind the door, he pondered for a few seconds, exchanged a glance with his companions, and said, all right. He took a step forward, slow but firm. Leah and Valentine followed closely. At this moment, the 4 silver bells tied to the sides of Leah's veil and her boots made no sound. In the dim and gloomy environment, the 4 moved forward. Suddenly, Lane stopped, muttering, is there a sound? Yes indeed. Lumion agreed. As soon as he finished speaking, he pushed open another door with a loud bang. It seemed to be the confession room of the church. Dim starlight streamed in, illuminating a simple low bed and a naked, muscular man. The muscular man was on top of a pale female body. For a moment, everyone was stunned, including the muscular man and the woman beneath him. A few seconds later, the muscular man turned his head and roared at Lane and the others, you bastards, you've disrupted the actions of the Holy Church. In the echoing roar, Lumion, who had already moved behind Lane and the others, waved his hand and laughed quickly. It seems we found the parish priest, my cabbages, see you tomorrow. Halfway through his sentence, he had already turned and ran towards the side door, with his words trailing off in the wind, growing fainter and fainter. At that moment Leah, Lane, and Valentine all had the same thought in their minds, the words of the middle-aged man named Pierre Guillaume. "This boy is the village's biggest prankster, you must stay away from him." Under the starlight falling from the sky, Lumion began to whistle. He put his hands in his pockets and walked leisurely along the country road. The parish priest was indeed having an affair with Madame Pules. These out-of-towners look like they have some status. The parish priest wouldn't dare do anything to them. He would have to pay a heavy price to prevent his reputation for having affairs in the church from spreading, right? Humph, he always wanted to hit on Aurel. "I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time," as he muttered to himself. Lumion returned to his home on the edge of the village. It was a semi-underground two-story house. The first floor was a kitchen doubling as a living room, with a roasting oven and a large stove. "Aurel! Aurel!" Lumion called as he climbed the stairs. No one answered him. There were 3 rooms on the second floor plus a bathroom, all with their doors open. Lumion scanned each room, but didn't see his sister. He thought for a moment, then went to the end of the corridor, climbed the ladder there, and got onto the roof. The orange roof was enveloped by the night, and a figure sat in the middle, hugging her knees and quietly looking at the starry sky. She was an exceptionally beautiful woman with long, thick, golden hair, light blue eyes, and bright features. This time, she was staring at the sky, at the twinkling points of light, her expression serene, like a statue. Lumion didn't say anything. He moved next to the woman and sat down. He lifted his head slightly and watched the distant forest, listening to the sound of the wind blowing through the trees. After some time, the woman lifted her arms and stretched lazily. "Aurel, I don't understand what's so great about this view that you often come to the roof." Lumion finally spoke. "Call me sister." Aurel flicked her finger on Lumion's head, then, she sighed and her expression darkened. "Once a philosopher said, there are only 2 things in this world that are worthy of awe, one is the morality in our hearts, and the other is the starry sky above our heads." Lumion glanced at his sister's slightly melancholic face and deliberately laughed. "I know the answer to this question, Emperor Rossel said it." Pfft. Aurel laughed. She immediately sniffed and raised her beautiful golden eyebrows. "You've been drinking again. It's called socializing." Lumion took the opportunity to talk about what happened just now. "I met 3 out-of-towners." Aurel couldn't help but laugh. "I'm really afraid that the parish priest will be scared into some kind of illness." The next second, her face turned serious. "Lumion, don't provoke the parish priest anymore. He won't do anything to me. It's more troublesome to get a new one. But I just hate seeing him." Lumion hadn't finished speaking when Aurel stood up. She looked down at her brother, smiled, and said, "All right, it's time to go to bed, my drunk little brother." As she spoke, Aurel casually tossed some silver dust, then she floated up like a little bird, slowly flying down from the roof and into the second-floor window. Lumion watched quietly, then shouted hurriedly, "What about me? Climb down yourself." Aurel answered mercilessly from inside the house. Lumion pouted, the smile on his face gradually fading. He looked at the silver light points extinguishing rapidly in the night, sighed softly, and muttered to himself, "I wonder when I will be able to possess such extraordinary power." Lumion sat on the rooftop, not immediately descending. The expression on his face had completely receded, his serious demeanor contrasting sharply with the jovial, prank-loving young man in the tavern, as if they were not the same person. Ever since he had accidentally discovered that Aurora possessed those magical powers, he had wanted to acquire them, but Aurora always told him that it was not something to be envied or pursued. On the contrary, it was very dangerous and full of pain, so she would not agree to her brother walking this path. Even though she did possess the method to bestow ordinary people with extraordinary powers, she would not tell Lumion. For this, Lumion could only keep trying to persuade and plead, unable to force her. After about 10 seconds, Lumion stood up. With nimble movements, he walked to the edge of the roof and climbed back to the second floor along the wooden ladder. He casually walked to the outside of Aurora's room. Seeing the brown wooden door wide open, he peeked inside. At this moment, Aurora, dressed in a light blue dress, was sitting behind the desk in front of the window, writing something in the bright light of a desk lamp. What was she writing so late? Something related to magic? Lumion leaned against the doorframe and joked, "Writing in a diary? Who writes diaries?" Aurora didn't look back, continuing to write with the champagne gold pen in her hand. Lumion disagreed. Didn't Emperor Roselle also have many diaries circulating? Roselle was the last emperor in the history of the Intis Republic, where the siblings currently lived. He ended the rule of the Sorin royal family, was crowned as Caesar by the chief executive, and declared himself emperor. He had many important inventions, including the steam engine, found the sea route to the south continent, and initiated the wave of colonization, symbolizing the era over 100 years ago. Unfortunately, he was betrayed in his later years and assassinated in the White Maple Palace of Trier. Many diaries of the emperor were circulated after his death, but they were all written in a language that no one else could understand, seemingly not existing anywhere in this world. So Roselle is not a serious person. Aurora, who was facing away from Lumion, snickered. "What are you writing then?" Lumian asked in a matter-of-course manner. This was what he really wanted to know. Aurora casually replied, "A letter." "To whom?" Lumian couldn't help but frown. Aurora put down the champagne gold pen with exquisite carvings, checking the words and sentences she had written. "A pen pal." "Pen pal?" Lumian was a bit baffled. What was this? Aurora laughed, casually brushing her golden hair behind her ears while educating her brother. "That's why I say you should read more newspapers and books, and stop messing around outside every day, even drinking. Look at you, what's the difference between you and an illiterate now? A pen pal is someone you meet through newspaper columns, periodicals, etc. You've never met them, and all communication is through letters. What's the point of such a friend?" Lumian was quite interested in this matter. He couldn't help but remove the hand that was holding the doorframe and touched his chin. Aurora had never had a boyfriend, she couldn't be fooled by a guy she'd never seen before. Meaning? Aurora thought for a moment. Firstly, emotional value. Okay, I know you don't understand what emotional value is. Humans are social animals, they need to communicate. Some things, some emotions, I definitely won't talk to the villagers about, and I can't tell you either. I need a more secretive outlet. This kind of pen pal who will never meet is just right. Secondly, don't underestimate my pen pals. Several of them are very impressive, and some are very knowledgeable. For example, this battery-operated lamp was given to me by one of my pen pals. Oil lamps and candles are too hard on the eyes, not suitable for writing at night. Before Lumian could ask again, Aurora raised her left hand and waved it back. "Go to sleep, my drunkard brother. Good night." "All right, good night." Although Lumian was unwilling, he didn't question further. Aurora immediately instructed, "Remember to close the door for me, it's a bit cold with the door open and the window open." Lumian slowly closed the brown wooden door. He walked back to his room step by step, took off his shoes, and sat on the bed in the dim darkness of the night. The wooden table against the window, the tilted chair, the small bookshelf against the side wall, and the wardrobe on the other side all came into Lumian's view. He sat quietly, lost in thought. He had always known that Aurora had her own secrets, that there were many things she hadn't told him, and he wasn't surprised by this at all. He was just worried that these secrets and things might pose a danger to Aurora, and if something really happened, what he could do was quite limited. He was just a physically strong, somewhat quick-witted ordinary person. One thought after another emerged, then fell away. Lumian exhaled softly, left the bed, and went to the washroom to freshen up. Then, he took off his jacket-style brown coat and threw himself into the still warm quilt. In early April on the mountain, the weather was still a bit cold. In a daze, Lumian seemed to see a cloud of grey mist. It filled the surroundings, making the things in the distance completely disappear. Lumian walked in a daze. But no matter which direction he went in, no matter how far he walked in the grey mist, he would always end up back in the same place. His bedroom, composed of a bed with a white four-piece set, a wooden table and chair placed horizontally in front of the window, a bookshelf, a wardrobe, etc. Lumian opened his eyes. The morning sun shone through the not-too-thick blue curtains, illuminating half of the bedroom. Lumian sat up, staring blankly at the scene, feeling as if he was still dreaming. He had that dream again. He dreamed of that never-dissipating grey mist. He raised his hand to pinch his temples, murmuring to himself, "It's getting more and more frequent, almost every day. If it weren't for the fact that this dream didn't bring any adverse effects, Lumian would definitely not be as calm as he is now. Of course, it didn't bring any good effects either. I really hope this hides some kind of adventure." Lumian muttered, rolling out of bed. He had just opened the door to his room and stepped into the hallway when he heard a noise coming from Aurora's room. What a coincidence. A smile appeared on Lumian's face. Suddenly, he had an idea and stepped back, standing at the edge of the door. When Aurora's bedroom door opened, Lumian quickly raised his right hand, pinching his temple, and a slightly painful expression appeared on his face. "What's wrong?" Aurora noticed this. "Success." Lumian cheered in his heart, making it look like he was trying to regain his composure. "I had that dream again," he replied in a low voice. Aurora's blonde hair hung loosely, and a hint of worry began to appear between her brows. The last plan didn't work, she thought for a moment. Maybe I should find you a hypnotist, a real hypnotist, to see what's causing it. One with magical powers?" Lumian asked on purpose. Aurora nodded lightly in response. "One of your pen pals?" Lumian couldn't help but ask one more question. "Why do you care about this? Think about how to solve your own problem." Aurora didn't answer directly. "Isn't that what I'm thinking about?" Lumian muttered in his heart. He went on to say, "Aurora, if I become a wizard, a person with extraordinary powers, I should be able to unlock the secret of the dream and put an end to it completely. Don't even think about it." Aurora responded without hesitation, her expression softened. "Lumian, I won't lie to you, this path is dangerous and painful. If there were no other choices, if the world weren't becoming more and more dangerous, I would rather be a normal writer and live happily." Lumian immediately said, "Then let me take on those dangers and pains. I'll protect you, and you just have to live happily and do what you want to do." He had thought about these words many times in his heart. Aurora was silent for 2 seconds, and then her smile suddenly bloomed. "Are you discriminating against women?" Without giving Lumian a chance to restate, she said seriously, "It's useless, once you choose this path, there's no chance to regret it. All right, I'm going to wash up, you study hard at home today, prepare for the university entrance exam in June. You keep saying that the world is becoming more and more dangerous, why take the exam?" Lumian muttered that he felt that the most important thing right now was to gain power, not to do papers. Aurora smiled, "Knowledge is power, my illiterate brother." Lumian had no words to say, he could only watch Aurora walk into the bathroom. In the afternoon, in the square of Cold Village, Raymond Clegg saw Lumian Lee squatting under an elm tree from afar, not knowing what he was thinking. "You're supposed to be studying at home, aren't you?" Raymond walked over, his tone filled with obvious envy. He was a friend of Lumian's, a little less than 1.7 meters tall, with brown hair and brown eyes, a plain face, and a bit of flush on his cheeks. Lumian lifted his head and smiled. "Didn't Aurora tell you? Even if you're hanging yourself, you have to take a breath. I've been studying for so long, I need to take a break." He spent the morning thinking about whether he could gain extraordinary power without going through Aurora. This required searching, clues, and him actively investigating that. In the end, he felt that the stories circulating in the village involving magical powers might hide some truth, hide some clues, so he specifically came here to wait for Raymond. "If I were you, I would rest at most for 15 minutes. Raymond leaned against the elm tree. "We don't have a sister who has read a lot of books to teach us, I'm going to learn to herd sheep next year." Lumian paid no heed to that remark, and mused. "Could you repeat the legend of the wizard you told last time?" Raymond, puzzled by Lumian's intention, recounted with uncertainty. "The one about the wizard? There used to be a wizard in the village, who later died. On the day of his burial, an owl flew in from outside and perched on the roof of the house, only flying away when the body was carried off. Then, the coffin became very heavy, and it took the strength of 9 oxen to move it." "How long ago was this?" Lumian probed further. Raymond became increasingly bewildered. "How would I know? I heard it from my father." "Let's go find your father." Lumian rose to his feet. He was always action-oriented and knew very clearly that the investigation of the village legend couldn't be delayed. The longer it was delayed, the more likely his sister would find out, and his sister, Errol, would certainly not allow him to continue. This was because in Errol's eyes, pursuing transcendental power was a very dangerous action. I knew all too well about the dangers. Errol wouldn't deceive me in this regard, but even if there was a mountain of knives ahead or a sea of fire, I had to move forward. I couldn't let Errol face it alone. These thoughts flickered in Lumian's mind as he stood up. Whenever she mentioned the world becoming more dangerous, the seriousness and concern on Errol's face were undisguisable. Raymond Clegg was even more bewildered. "What do we need him for?" To ask how long ago the legend of the wizard happened, Lumian glanced at Raymond. Why was this guy so slow to understand human language? It seemed necessary to test his intelligence at some point. Raymond's face was full of confusion as he looked at Lumian. "Why do we need to ask so clearly? Should I just fool this guy with an excuse, or should I tell him straight?" Lumian immediately fell into deep thought, considering that his future investigations couldn't be completely hidden from his friends, and the reason for pursuing the truth of the legend itself seemed like a lie, and no villager would believe it if it was spread. Lumian quickly made up his mind. He instantly put on the smile he usually wore when lying. Raymond took a step back. "Speak clearly." Lumian straightened his dark short coat and the linen shirt underneath, smiling. "I think the legend of the wizard is worth pondering." "Where is it worth pondering?" Raymond thought for a while before asking. "There used to be a wizard in the village." This sentence, Lumian said seriously, "think about it, when I make up stories to deceive people, I would never mention a time, place, and background that everyone can immediately verify. But the legend clearly mentions that there was once a wizard in our village, Kolda village. If this was a lie, wouldn't it be easily debunked by everyone?" "But that was a long time ago," Raymond objected. "I'm referring to when the story first started circulating a long time ago. They should have easily verified whether a wizard died in the village at that time," Lumian said with a smile. "Since the story has been passed down to this day, it indicates that it is very likely to have actually happened." This reason couldn't convince Raymond. "But when you make up stories, you often use 100 years ago, hundreds of years ago, long ago, to make it impossible for people to verify. That's why we need to find your father to confirm it." Lumian wore an expression that said, "Now you know why I need to find your father." "True." Raymond accepted this explanation, but felt that something was amiss. As the two left the square and walked deeper into the village, Raymond finally realized, "But why do you need to confirm whether such a legend is true or false?" "Because he's a wizard. If we can confirm where he lived and where he was buried, we might discover his secrets and gain magical powers that surpass ordinary people." Lumian spoke the truth that sounded like a lie. As expected, Raymond showed a face that said, "Don't deceive me, most of those stories are made up to scare children, how could they be true? Besides, pursuing the power of a wizard will get you thrown into the tribunal. The Intis Republic, located on the northern continent of this world, the orthodox deities are the eternal sun and the god of steam and machinery. Their churches divided almost all the belief of the people and did not allow the Goddess of Night Church of the Rune Kingdom, the Storm Lord Church, the Mother Earth Church of the Fenipot Kingdom, the God of Knowledge and Wisdom Church of the Lumberg and other southern countries, the War God Church of the Phazak Empire to preach. The religious tribunal of the Eternal Sun Church was always feared by the people. Countless heretics and heterodox were locked up and suffered cruel treatment. Lumion laughed. Why worry about that now? You've said it yourself, most of those legends are made up, the chances of finding the wizard's legacy are almost non-existent. Besides, even if we really find the wizard's legacy, we don't necessarily have to inherit that forbidden power. We can completely hand it over to the church in exchange for their rewards. Yes, as a wizard, there must be a lot of treasures in the burial goods. The church Lumion referred to was the Eternal Sun Church, because their Kolda village did not have the God of Steam and Machinery Church, which was often concentrated in big cities and places with factories. Seeing that Raymond was moved, Lumion secretly clicked his tongue and added, "Do you really want to be a shepherd?" The shepherd he referred to was not the pastoral shepherd in the understanding of the city dwellers, not as part of the family, driving a few sheep to graze every morning, and just looking after them. In the Leston province of the Daleridge region where Kolda village is located, shepherding is a profession, a destined hard and lonely profession. They are hired by the owners of the flocks, driving dozens or even hundreds of sheep back and forth between the mountains and the plains. This is called transference. Every autumn, when the highland pastures in the mountains around Kolda village wither, the shepherds drive the flocks out of the mountain pass to the warmer grasslands in the distance, often crossing the border into Fenipot, Lumberg and other countries. In early May, they drive the flocks back to the villages, shear the wool, wean the lambs, and in June, they go up the mountain to the highland pastures, live in the huts, make cheese while grazing the flocks, until the weather turns cold. In this way, the shepherds transfer year after year, spending their lives on the road, with very little time to return to the village. Therefore, most of them are single, find it difficult to marry, unable to form a family, and the few widows who have to shepherd for a living are very popular in this group. Raymond fell silent. After a while, he hesitated to speak. Your idea sounds fun, it could be a good way to kill time. Normally, once a family decides which child should become a shepherd, they send him to a shepherd's home to learn the trade between the ages of 15 and 18. After 3 years, the child officially becomes a shepherd, seeking employment wherever it can be found. Now 17, Raymond has been finding different excuses to delay this process for over 2 years. If life continues without change, he will have to learn to shepherd next year. Let's go. Lumion patted Raymond's shoulder. Is your father in the fields or at home? There's not much work lately and Lent is coming soon. If he's not at home, he's at the pub. Raymond responded with a tone of envy. How do you not know this? You're definitely not a farmer, you have a good sister. Ignoring Raymond's exclamation, Lumion continued walking with his hands in his pockets. As they approached the rundown village pub, a figure appeared from a side road. The man was dressed in a dark brown robe with a hood, a rope tied around his waist, and a pair of new, soft-looking black leather shoes on his feet. Pierre of the Beryl family? Raymond exclaimed in surprise. Lumion also stopped, looking towards the side road. It's me. Pierre Beryl waved his hand with a smile. He was thin, with slightly sunken eyes and greasy, curly black hair. His face was full of stubble, looking like it hadn't been shaved in a while. Why are you back? Raymond asked in confusion. Pierre Beryl, a shepherd, should be grazing on the plains outside the mountain pass in late March and early April. How could he be in the village? Even if he had moved to Lumberg or the northern border of Fineport, he would have just started his journey. It would take about a month to return to the Darien Mountains. Pierre, with his gentle, smiling blue eyes, happily replied, Isn't Lent coming soon? I haven't participated in years, I can't miss it this year. Don't worry, I have a companion to help watch the flock. The good thing about being a shepherd is the lack of supervision. As long as you can find someone to help, you can go wherever you want, it's very free. Lent is a widespread festival in Intis, where people welcome the arrival of spring in various ways, praying for a year of good harvest. This has nothing to do with the Church of the Eternal Sun or the Church of Steam and Machinery, but it has become a folk custom. As long as there is no worship of pagan gods, it is tacitly approved by the Orthodox. You just want to see who will be chosen as the spring sprite this year, right? Lumion teased. In the Lent of Kolda village, a beautiful girl is chosen to play the role of the spring sprite, which is part of the celebration. Pierre laughed along. I hope it's your sister, Aurora, but she definitely won't agree, and she's not the right age. All right, he pointed to the nearby pub. I'm going to pray at the church, I'll treat you to a drink later. Raymond responded instinctively, you don't have to, you barely have any money. The divine teaches us, even if you only have a penny, share it with your poor brothers. Pierre recited a proverb that is popular among the shepherds of the Darien region. At this point, Lumion smiled at Raymond. Pierre has come into money, he's definitely going to treat us to a drink. He was referring to Pierre Beryl's new pair of leather shoes. Pierre Barrel was very pleased. This time the employer was pretty good, he gave me several sheep, and there will be some wool, cheese, and leather later. The compensation for shepherds consists of food, a small amount of money, and a share of livestock, cheese, wool, and leather. What they can get and how much they can get depends on the contract signed with the employer. For shepherds who need to travel long distances, a good pair of comfortable leather shoes is the most urgent and practical need. Watching Pierre Barrel walk towards the village square, Lumien's gaze gradually became deep, filled with a bit of confusion. He muttered to himself, just to participate in Lent, he spent 1 to 2 weeks, or even nearly a month, to rush back. After a moment's thought, Lumien withdrew his gaze and walked towards the pub with Raymond. The pub had no name, nor did it need one. There was only one in the village of Koldu, and the villagers liked to call it the Old Pub. As soon as he entered the pub, Lumien habitually looked around. Suddenly, his gaze stopped at a particular spot. He saw the stranger from last night, the one who had left early. The stranger who didn't seem to be with Lane, Leah, and Valentine. She was a lady, dressed in an orange dress, with wavy brown hair, and pale blue eyes staring at the pale red alcoholic drink in her hand. She was beautiful and languid, as if she didn't belong in the low, dim, and run-down pub. Light red wine, a typical preference of a city dweller. Lumuen's gaze finally rested on the glass of wine in the lady's hand. The light red wine is a liquor brewed from sugar and pickled cherries, both in color and taste. It's quite popular among ladies. Of course, other suitable fruits can be used instead of cherries. The taste will vary slightly, but not significantly. This is one of the few high-end wines that the old tavern in Korda village can offer. They have it in stock because Mrs. Poiris fell in love with this light red wine after a trip to the provincial capital of Baijer. Mrs. Poiris is the wife of Biest, the local administrative officer and territorial judge. Her ancestors were nobles, who lost their titles in the era of Emperor Rossel. She is also one of the mistresses of the local priest, Guillaume Benet. Not many people in the village know about this, and Lumuen is one of them. Lumuen withdrew his gaze and headed towards the bar. Sitting there was a man in his 40s, dressed in a single linen shirt and matching trousers. His brown hair was thinning and somewhat disheveled, and his eyes, mouth, forehead, and other areas had wrinkles due to years of labor. This was Raymond's father, Pierre Krieg, another Pierre d'Asso. Lumuen would joke in front of Leah, Ryan, and others that if you shout Pierre in the bar, at least 1/3 of the people would respond. When people in the village talk about these Pierres and Guillaumes, they always add a qualifier of whose family they belong to, otherwise they can't tell them. Apart that I and many families, the father and son have the same name, either Pierre or Guillaume, and neighbors can only add old, big, small, to distinguish them. Dad, why don't you go to the village square and chat with the others? Raymond walked up to his father. The men in the village love to gather under the elm tree in the square or at someone's house to play dice, cards, chess, and discuss various rumors. Going to the tavern costs money. Pierre Krieg took a sip of his red wine, glanced at his second son, and said, I'll go later. There should be no one in the square now. Right, where did all the men in the village go? Lumuen was suddenly puzzled that he hadn't seen a single person in the square just now. Uncle, I wanted to ask you something. Lumuen said bluntly. Pierre Krieg was immediately wary. A new prank? The story of the wolf is coming indeed has a basis in reality. Lumuen tilted his head, signaling Raymond to speak. Raymond organized his words and said, Dad, how long ago did the wizard legend you told me about actually happen? The one where it took 9 oxen to pull the coffin. Pierre Krieg took a gulp of wine and asked in confusion, why are you asking this? This is a story your grandfather told me when I was a kid. Korda village, where they live, and the neighboring provinces of Olay and Suet are located in the south of the Intis Republic, famous for their vineyards. The wine here, especially the inferior kind, is very cheap. In some years, people can even drink wine like water. Raymond was disappointed to hear this because his grandfather had long since passed away. Just then, Pierre Krieg added, your grandfather said he saw it with his own eyes when he was a kid. Since then, he's been afraid of owls, fearing that they would carry away his soul. Lumuen and Raymond's eyes lit up at the same time. There are actually clues. Was the wizard's legend actually something some people had experienced? Did Grandpa ever say where the wizard originally lived and where he was buried? Raymond asked further. Pierre Krieg shook his head. Who would care about that? Seeing that Raymond wanted to ask more, Lumuen patted him and said loudly, it's time to go to the river. Raymond was about to follow Lumuen when Pierre Krieg suddenly remembered something. Wait, Raymond, you're going to be at the Green Watcher in a couple of days. I need to tell you some things to be aware of. The Green Watcher is responsible for patrolling the highland pastures and fields around the village, preventing people from grazing during the forbidden period or allowing livestock to damage the seedlings. Lumuen didn't eavesdrop and went to the washroom attached to the tavern. When he came out, he deliberately passed by the out-of-town lady who was drinking the light red wine and whose age was indeterminable. Although he wouldn't strike up a conversation, he wanted to observe in advance and collect details. When the time came, this might come in handy, just like when he used Leah, Ryan and others to bust the local priest's affair. After taking a few glances without a trace, Lumyuan prepared to bypass this corner and wait for Raymond at the tavern's entrance. At that moment, the lady in the orange dress, with a lazy demeanor, raised her head. Lumyuan's gaze, which he hadn't had time to withdraw, collided directly with her gaze. For a moment, even Lumyuan, with his thick-skinned face, felt a bit awkward. Thoughts popped into his head. Should I compliment her beauty like the local priest and the administrative officer, turning observation into a conversation, or show my naive side and turn around and leave hurriedly? Just as he had made up his mind, the lady smiled and said, "Have you been dreaming frequently lately?" Suddenly, Lumyuan felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His mind went numb, and all his thoughts froze. It was only a second or two before he forced a smile and said, "Isn't dreaming a very normal thing?" The lady, leaning her hand against her cheek, looked at Lumyuan and chuckled. "A dream where you're surrounded by a thick fog." How did she know? Lumyuan's pupils dilated instantly, and a hint of fear appeared in his expression. Although he had experienced quite a few things, he was still young, and for a moment, he couldn't control his expression. Calm down, calm down." Lumyuan comforted himself while relaxing the muscles on his face, and asked back, "Did you stay last night and listen to the story I told those 3 out-of-towners?" The lady didn't answer. Instead, she took out a deck of cards from her orange handbag. She looked at Lumyuan again and smiled. "Draw a card. It might help you unravel the secret hidden in your dream." This. Lumyuan was both surprised and suspicious. He was both intrigued and highly wary. He glanced at the deck of cards and frowned, saying, "Tarot?" It looked like the tarot cards invented by Emperor Roselle for divination. The lady glanced down and gave a self-deprecating smile. "Sorry, I took the wrong one." She stuffed the 22 tarot cards back into her medium-sized handbag and took out another deck of cards. "This is also tarot, but it belongs to the minor arcana. You are not yet qualified to draw the major arcana, and I am not qualified to let you draw. The minor arcana consists of 56 cards, composed of 4 suits, cups, wands, swords, and pentacles." What was she talking about? Lumyuan was confused. This lady looks beautiful and has a good temperament, but her actual performance is not quite normal. She seems to be a bit mentally challenged. "Draw one." The city girl shook the minor arcana in her hand and said with a smile, "It's free, try it, it might solve your dream problem." Lumyuan laughed. "My sister once said that the most expensive thing is the free one." That does make a lot of sense. The lady thought for a moment. She put the minor arcana next to the glass of blush wine, and then said, "But as long as you don't pay, how can I, a stranger, force you to pay in Colda village?" "That's right, it won't hurt to draw one. There's finally a hint about that dream. How can I give up without trying? But will this involve a wizard's curse? Ask Oral for help." Lumyan's mind was full of thoughts, and he was hesitant to make a decision. The lady did not urge him. After about 10 seconds, Lumyan slowly bent down, extended his right hand, scattered the pile of minor arcana, and drew one from the middle. 7 of Wands. The languid lady glanced at the card face. On the card, a man with a firm face dressed in green stood on a mountain top, holding a wand, against the 6 wands attacked by the enemy from the foot of the mountain. "What does this mean?" Lumyan asked. The lady smiled. "Interpret it yourself according to the pattern: crisis, challenge, confrontation, courage, etc. Of course, these are not important. What is important is that this card is now given to you. When fate comes, you will find its true meaning. For me." Lumyan was even more confused. Is this card really cursed? The lady put away the remaining minor arcana, picked up the wine glass, and drained the little blush wine inside. She ignored Lumyan's question, walked leisurely to the stairs on the side of the old tavern, and went up to the 2nd floor. Obviously, she lived there. Lumyan wanted to chase after her, but he stopped after only taking 1 step, his thoughts fluctuating. Is this really just an ordinary card? She gave me this card, isn't that deck missing a card forever, and can't be used anymore? Oral should be able to see the problem. At this moment, Raymond came over. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, that stranger is really good looking." Lumyan casually perfunctory. "I think your sister Oral is even more beautiful." Raymond immediately lowered his voice. "Lumyan, what do we do next? My grandfather has been dead for a long time." Lumyan, who was eager to go home, thought for a while. "One is to ask the elderly who are about the same age as your grandfather and are still alive, and the other is to flip through the register in the church. Consider this last." Thinking of his just ruining the good deeds of the parish priest, Lumyan felt that he should not go to the church unless necessary. Recently, in Colda village, where there is only one church, the church takes on part of the government functions due to the small number of officials, such as recording funerals and weddings. Without waiting for Raymond to ask again, Lumyan added, "Let's see who are the old people who meet the criteria separately, and ask tomorrow." "Good." Raymond immediately agreed. Inside the semi-underground 2-story building, after listening to Lumyan's narrative, Oral looked at the wand card carefully for a while. "It's indeed a very ordinary card. I didn't detect any curse or other peculiar existence." "Oral, sister, what do you think that stranger wants to do? Why does she know I have such dreams?" Lumian asked. Oral shook her head. Since she has already declared her intentions, it's relatively okay. I will observe her carefully these days. You keep this card for now, there might be some changes, don't worry, I'm watching. Okay. Lumian tried to relax a little. At night, Lumian stuffed the wand card into the clothes hanging on the back of the chair, got into bed, closed his eyes and fell asleep. After an unknown period of time, he seemed to see that grey fog again in his drowsiness. Suddenly, he had a start, and woke up in his dream that he felt that he had regained his clarity and found his reason, and the dream filled with grey fog still exists. Lumian instinctively looked around and saw the familiar furniture, a table, a chair, a bookshelf, a wardrobe, and a bed. This was his bedroom, shrouded in a faint grey mist. A lucid dream? Am I having a lucid dream? Lumian's pupils dilated in surprise. A lucid dream refers to a state where one is dreaming but retains the ability to think and remember as if awake. It's a rare phenomenon and can be triggered more frequently by those who have undergone special training. Previously, Aurora had tried numerous times to induce this state in Lumian in an attempt to unravel the mysteries of his foggy dreams and eliminate this threat, but she had never succeeded, and now, Lumian had inexplicably become lucid in his dream after a brief moment of shock. Lumian regained his composure and considered a possibility. Is this caused by the Seven of Wands tarot card? That woman said this card would help me unlock the secrets of my dreams, so, its purpose is to allow me to enter a lucid dream state and truly explore this area shrouded in fog? Compared to my previous impression, the fog seems to have thinned a lot. As thoughts raced through his mind, Lumian moved to a chair placed at an angle, leaning on the table against the wall, and peered out the window. What he saw was not the familiar scene he was used to. The dream had not replicated his home village, cold beneath the pale and thin grey-white mist. The most eye-catching sight was a towering mountain composed purely of brownish-red stones and reddish-brown soil. Stretching 20 to 30 meters into the sky, surrounding this mountain were circles of buildings, some collapsed on the ground, others charred black, indistinguishable in their original form. From Lumian's perspective, they appeared like destroyed tombs, arranged in a circular pattern, not exactly neat. The entire area was uneven, with many broken stones and not a single weed. Furthermore, the fog in the high sky thickened and whitened, making it impossible for Lumian to confirm the presence of the sun. All he knew was that the area was unusually dim, like a night illuminated only by starlight. After observing for a while, he murmured to himself, is this the full scene of the dream? This dream that had troubled him for many years, was this its true state? After a moment of distraction, Lumian began to consider a more practical issue. Where is the so-called secret of the dream? On that mountain, or in one of the destroyed buildings? Lumian did not rush to leave his bedroom and enter that area to explore the dream, but instead stayed where he was, examining every visible place. Suddenly, he felt a figure flash past within the ruins of the buildings surrounding the mountain. Due to the limited height of the two-story building he was in, and the undeniable presence of the fog, even though it was thin, Lumian couldn't confirm whether he was hallucinating. After a while, he exhaled slowly and told himself, don't rush, be patient. Don't rush, be patient. It seems that this dream really holds many secrets, and it doesn't seem to be entirely mine. Blind exploration could lead to danger. Yes, I'll go find that woman first thing tomorrow, see if I can get more detailed information, and then decide what to do. As thoughts swirled in his mind, Lumian withdrew his gaze, preparing to leave this dream and go to sleep, but in his lucid state, he was unsure how to actually wake himself up. After several unsuccessful attempts to suggest to himself to wake up, he lay down on the bed, trying to make his mind chaotic, simulating the state he was in. When he fell asleep after an unknown amount of time, Lumian suddenly sat up and saw the pale golden sunlight filtering into the room through the curtains. Finally awake, it seems that falling asleep in a dream will restore that groggy state, and then I can leave. Lumian breathed a sigh of relief and began to mutter to himself. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Aurora? Lumian tensed, worrying about potential bad developments. It's me. Aurora's voice came from outside the room. Lumian got out of bed, walked quickly to the door, grabbed the handle, and pulled it open. Outside the door was indeed Aurora. She was dressed in a white silk nightgown, her golden hair softly draped over her shoulders. How did it go? She seemed very sure that Lumian had just woken up. Lumian did not hide anything and told Aurora about his experience. Aurora nodded as if in thought. So the purpose of that card is to make you have a lucid dream. She then asked, what do you plan to do next? Lumian responded, I'll grab something to eat, then I'll go find that woman. See if I can get more information, figure out her real intentions. All right. Aurora didn't object. She continued, I'll also write letters to inquire about the dream landscape you described, to see what those things really represent. With that, she glanced at Lumian's suddenly tense expression and smiled, don't worry, I'll make sure to make some modifications and won't reveal everything at once. The principle of gradual progression is something I taught you after all. Also, try to keep a friendly attitude when talking to that lady. It doesn't mean we're afraid of her, having one more friend is always better than having one more enemy. No problem. Lumian solemnly promised. Colda village, the old pub. As soon as Lumian approached the bar, he asked Morris. Benet, the pub owner who also worked as a bartender. Which room is that out-of-town woman staying in upstairs? The old pub also served as the only inn in the village, with 6 rooms available for accommodation on the second floor. Morris. Benet was neither fat nor burly. Like most villagers, he had black hair and blue eyes. His most distinctive feature was his always red nose, a result of frequent drinking. He was a distant cousin of the local priest, Guillaume. Benet, but they were not close. What do you want to know that for? Morris. Benet asked curiously, do you think a city woman like her would be interested in a country bumpkin like you? His face was filled with a clear inquisitive expression, showing a strong interest in unusual relationships between men and women. Aren't you a country bumpkin too? Lumian retorted, then quickly made up a reason. That woman lost something last night, and I found it this morning. I'm just delivering it back to her. Really? Morris. Benet doubted Lumian's credibility. This guy lied in 8 out of 10 sentences. What else? Do you think she could be interested in me? Lumian argued confidently. I guess not. Morris. Benet was convinced. She's in the room near the square, opposite the washroom. After watching Lumian walk toward the stairs, the tavern owner muttered to himself while cleaning a glass, it's not impossible. Sometimes, people want to try new flavors. His mutterings were just loud enough for Lumian to hear. On the second floor of the tavern, Lumian found the only washroom in the dimly lit hallway, and then noticed a white paper sign hanging on the brass handle of a dark red wooden door opposite. It read in Indies, resting, do not disturb. Lumian looked down for a few seconds, didn't rush to knock on the door, but instead stepped back and leaned against the wall. He planned to wait here for the lady to come out. His past life of wandering taught him that when an opportunity presents itself, he must be extremely decisive in making an attempt, try his best to seize it, without any hesitation, without overthinking, without caring about face, without being timid or fearful. Otherwise the opportunity will surely slip away, and he will fall into a more miserable vicious cycle. And when the opportunity does not appear, he must be patient, persistent, and wait despite any discomfort. Time passed by the minute and second. Lumian stood there, not showing any signs of impatience. If there were any onlookers here, if it weren't for his occasional movements, they might mistake him for a statue. Finally, the door creaked open. The lady had changed into a light green skirt with white edges, her brown hair tied up loosely at the back of her head. She glanced at Lumian for a second with her light blue eyes, then looked down at the paper sign on the door handle, and asked with a smile, how long have you been waiting? She wasn't surprised at all to see Lumian here. Lumian took a step forward and said, that doesn't matter. He tried to keep his tone calm, not too eager. What do you want to ask? The lady asked directly. Here. Lumian looked around. The lady replied with a smile, if you don't mind, I don't either. Lumian had already observed that those who originally lived here, like Ryan and Leah, seemed to be absent at the moment. Besides himself and the lady in front of him, there was no one else on the second floor of the tavern. He composed himself and asked, what secrets does that dream hide? The lady laughed out loud. That's a question you should be answering, not asking me. She paused for a moment before adding, all I can tell you is, you can obtain certain extraordinary powers there. Extraordinary powers. Lumian was initially intrigued, but then asked in confusion, what's the point of gaining extraordinary powers in a dream? It won't affect reality. The lady smiled, in the realm of the extraordinary, anything is possible. Perhaps, it can really affect reality. The extraordinary power I've been seeking appeared in my life this way. Lumian fell silent. The lady became serious and added, I should remind you that it's full of dangers. If you die there, you will die completely. Exploring that dream might lead to my death in reality? Lumian didn't understand, but chose to believe. After a few seconds, he asked, what will happen if I don't explore? In theory, nothing will happen, no one is forcing you. The lady thought for a moment, but I'm not sure if it will change over time, and if there is a change, the probability of the situation getting worse is far higher than it getting better. How much higher? Lumian pressed, 90% compared to 10%? No, 99.99% compared to 0.01%. The lady added carefully, of course, this is just my personal judgment, you can choose not to believe. Lumian was immediately torn, his mind full of thoughts. I've been feeling more and more that the dream is a hidden danger, ignoring it is the worst choice. But if I really want to explore, the possibility of accidents is very high in the situation where I know nothing. Wait until Aurora gets some information from her pen pals before trying? In that case, Aurora definitely won't agree with me trying to obtain extraordinary powers by exploring the dream. Isn't my investigation of the truth of the legend seeking extraordinary power? That's too dangerous, it really could lead to death. Or, I could explore the edge of the dream ruins first, without risking going deeper. This is also equivalent to collecting information. Yeah, I can tell Aurora about the previous conversation, but I can't mention the possibility of obtaining extraordinary powers. After these thoughts settled, Lumian looked at the lady in front of him and asked in a deep voice, who are you exactly? Why did you give me that tarot card? Why did you give me the opportunity to explore that dream? The lady smiled slightly. I'll tell you when you've unlocked the secret of the dream. After leaving the old tavern, Lumion stood on the rammed earth road, hesitating about where to go. The morning sun was shedding a bit of coolness. Just then, Raymond Clegg came from the side. I was just looking for you. Is there anything? Lumion, back to normal, asked deliberately. Raymond looked surprised. Did you forget? We are going to meet an old man who is about the same age as my grandfather today, to ask about the legend of wizards. Lumion held his head in pain. Really? I don't remember, or are you having hallucinations? Raymond was both shocked and scared, about to recall the details to confirm whether yesterday's events were his own fantasies, when he suddenly saw a smile on Lumion's face. You bastard, you're pranking me again. Raymond couldn't help but curse. You don't curse very well. Lumion sighed. Ava is better at it than you. Ava Lizzie is a beautiful young girl in the village of Coldu, now a goose shepherdess. Her father Guillaume Lizzie is a shoemaker, known for making leather shoes with the leather provided by the shepherds, and he is quite famous in several surrounding villages. Ava. Raymond's expression changed. He then looked at Lumion. Ava is our friend, right? Yes. Lumion nodded with a smile. In addition to them, Guillaume from the Berry family, Ava's cousin Azema Lizzie, are young people who often play together. Why not let Ava also participate in our investigation of the truth of the legend? Raymond suggested. You know, her father always says, why women must give a dowry when they get married. Many good families have fallen like this. It makes her very anxious. If she can get some treasure or reward in the investigation, she should feel much better. I've heard similar words from several family men in the village, including the parish priest. They wish their brothers would stay at home forever. Even if they get married, they don't go out to start a family separately. That would require giving them their due property. Lumion laughed and glanced at Raymond, and said casually, so many families tend to have one of their children become a shepherd, so he won't marry in general and has a certain income. Most of the time he can support himself. Raymond's face gradually darkened. He hadn't really thought about this issue. This is also why he likes to hang out with Lumion. Although most people in the village say he has a bad character, likes to lie and prank, but his knowledge really exceeds all his peers. Unlike himself, who knows little and spends his days in a daze, can only follow the arrangements of his family. Knowing is good. Lumion muttered to himself, bringing the topic back on track. We don't have much time now. We need to ask people as soon as possible. We'll find Ava tomorrow. Yes, we can also let little Guillaume and Azema participate later. This is not only a potential opportunity for gains, but also an interesting activity, can exercise our ability. Let little Guillaume and Azema join too. Raymond was a bit reluctant. The more people who share the reward, the less he gets, and most importantly, in that case, he won't find a chance to please Ava. Lumion looked at him, his eyes filled with compassion and pity. Silly boy, do you think Ava would look at you? She has high eyebrows, only wants to marry into a good family. She clearly has a certain liking for me, the bad guy, but she can control herself. In the local dialect of Dallery, high eyebrows means high vision, not looking at ordinary people. My sister said, the more people the stronger. Lumion simply explained, who are the old people we need to visit? You didn't investigate? Raymond asked in surprise. I was so busy with the wand card thing, where did I have the energy to ask? Lumion laughed. Of course I did, now I want to test your ability to gather information. Raymond didn't doubt. There are 9 old people in the village who are about the same age as my grandfather, or a little older. They are 6 women and 3 men. Ladies do live longer. Lumion listened quietly, thought for a moment and said, we don't need to visit the last 2, they are from other villages and married here. Well, let's ask Naroka first. She's the oldest, and she was probably already an adult when the wizard thing happened. Naroka's real name is not this. This is the honorific for her. In the province of Leston, married women of high birth or who act as actual heads of households have the right to be called madam, specifically by adding an to the end of their name to indicate femininity, and prefixing their name with na, which means madam or mistress. Mrs. Pualis, on the other hand, can't be called na plus, because her family has long fallen and she has to listen to the administrator beist at home. So she can only be called madam separately. Naroka's husband died early, and she took on the whole family. Even when her 2 sons grew up, got married, and had children, and she herself was old, she still held the economic power of the house. This is quite rare in Colda village. In most cases, men are the dominant ones. In families without a father, once the child grows up, he will naturally take back the power to manage the whole family from his mother. Okay. Raymond had no doubts. After circling a few buildings, Lumion saw 4 old women sitting in front of a 2-story house, basking in the sun and chatting casually. Meanwhile, they were also picking lice from each other's bodies, which was quite leisurely. In the rural areas of the Intis Republic, picking lice from each other is a fun activity to get closer and show affection. Go ask now. Raymond hesitated a bit. He was afraid that their pursuit of the truth of the legend would spread. Wait a bit longer. Lumion nodded solemnly. As far as he knew, many rumors in the village were produced and spread layer by layer through such gatherings. After a while, the other 3 old women left one after another due to chores at home. Good morning, Naroka. Lumion walked over immediately. Naroka was already white-haired and her eyes were slightly cloudy. She was dressed in a dark long dress made of coarse cloth, her hands seemed to be covered with chicken skin, and her face had obvious patches. When is Aurora coming out to socialize? Many people in the village are thinking about her. Naroka looked at Lumion and asked with a smile, many men, right? Lumion entered the state of you say yours, I say mine, and asked curiously, Naroka, I heard you've seen a real wizard. The one that 9 oxen can't pull the coffin. Naroka's expression changed subtly. Who told you that? His grandfather told him when he came back at night. Lumion started to bluff. Naroka was taken aback. Can souls really return home? It was my father who told me, my grandfather mentioned it when he was alive. Raymond couldn't bear to see Lumion fooling the old woman. Naroka seemed a bit disappointed, and it took her a while before she said, nobody knew he was a wizard before that man died, he acted quite normally. Just like you don't know that Aurora is a wizard. Lumion responded in his heart. Until he suddenly died, and that owl flew in. Naroka fell into memories. What she said next was basically consistent with the legend. Lumion further asked, where did that wizard live at that time? Naroka glanced at him. It's where you and Aurora live now. After the wizard was buried, the parish priest at the time took a few people to take away the valuable things and burned down the house. For about 20 or 30 years, no one dared to approach there. Later, this incident was gradually forgotten. Later, Aurora came, bought that land, and rebuilt a house. Our house. Lumion was taken aback. This answer was completely unexpected. In an instant, he thought of some problems that he usually overlooked. Given Aurora's ability to make money and her hidden extraordinary abilities, why did she choose to settle down in such a rural place like Cold Village? Whether it's the provincial capital of Biger, the textile center of Suxit, or the capital of Triel, they are all better choices. Even if you want to pick a place with a good environment and good air, these big cities also have certain areas to choose from. Aurora once said that the best hiding place is in the big city. Lumion's thoughts were rolling, unable to calm down. It was only today that he learned that the land chosen by Aurora, the land where the house was built, once belonged to a wizard. Where was that wizard buried? Raymond next to him couldn't help asking. There was no hope for the property in the house, so they could only see if the wizard's body was special. Naroka said with a smile, such a big thing would definitely alarm the parish priest. At that time, everyone used 9 oxen to pull the coffin to the cemetery next to the church. The parish priest held a ceremony and purified it. Finally, the body was burned into ashes, a hole was dug and buried. Oh. Raymond couldn't hide his disappointment. What do you want to do by asking these? Naroka looked at his expression for a while and asked. Lumion laughed and told a more like a lie truth. I want to find the wizard's treasure. Young people should not always fantasize. Naroka advised. Okay. Lumion behaved very obediently. He and Raymond said goodbye to Naroka and walked on the road to the village square. There's no hope, Lumion, there's no hope for this. After bypassing a building, Raymond opened his mouth in frustration. Indeed, everything that should be burned has been burned, and everything that should be taken away has been taken away for decades. Lumion nodded because the dream matter has an opportunity, so he is relatively not so disappointed. Raymond agreed, yes, the only thing in the whole legend that has not been destroyed is that owl. Owl. Lumion's eyes lit up and he looked towards the forest outside the village. Raymond shivered and quickly added, but after so many years, it must be dead. He was very afraid of contacting owls, such evil creatures. In the southern part of Intis, owls, nightingales, and crows are considered ominous, evil, and serving the devil. They often take away human souls or bring bad luck. Lumion just had a sudden inspiration. It was not something he really wanted to do. Forget the fact that so many years had passed since the event. The life of an owl is much shorter than that of a human. The owl that flew in when the wizard died should have long since decomposed. The sheer number of owls in these mountains alone was enough to squash Lumion's desire to pursue this lead. Too many. The owl had no distinct features. No, in the legend, the owl doesn't have a specific image. Naroka didn't mention it either. We didn't ask detailed enough. Lumion came back to his senses, and smiled at Raymond. An owl related to the wizard might live for 100 years. Seeing Raymond growing more fearful, he comforted him. Don't worry, this is our last resort, I don't want to face a monster. Let's ask some other elders, maybe there are key clues that Naroka overlooked. Then he added in a bewitching tone, if I were a wizard, I wouldn't carry all my treasures with me or keep them at home. I would definitely hide some of them somewhere, in case the Inquisition suddenly attacked, and I had to flee immediately without time to take anything, leaving my money bag empty. One of the important duties of the Inquisition of the Eternal Sun Church was to exterminate all wizards and witches, and their great achievements were widely spread among the country folks. That's right. Raymond perked up again. He said with longing, it's a pity that so many years have passed, the treasures seized by the church must have been spent long ago. Young man, that's a dangerous thought, Lumion teased. The two continued to visit the old Pierre of the Mori family, Nephelia, and other elders. Although their answers were similar to Naroka's, the experienced Lumion and Raymond still managed to extract more details. For example, the owl was of a large size, similar to its kind, sharp beak, cat-like face, brown feathers, scattered small spots, brownish-yellow sclera, black pupils. But its body was larger than similar owls, and its eyes seemed to be able to move, not as stiff as its kind, looking dull. In all the descriptions, these differences made the owl appear more sinister. It seems there are no useful clues for now. On the road to the village square, Lumion said to Raymond, we can only focus on other legends. Okay. Raymond was no longer as frustrated as he was at the beginning. Which one should we choose? This guy is both proactive and hardworking. Lumion silently praised, ready to reward Raymond. He nodded and said, think about it carefully when you go back, and we'll discuss and decide tomorrow. I'll teach you some combat skills in the afternoon. Great. Raymond was delighted by this unexpected news. After all, Oral was very good at fighting. How else could she deal with some of the rough men in the village? Her brother should be no different. Saying goodbye to Raymond Clegg, Lumion took the path to his own home. After a while, he saw a few men coming towards him. The leader was in his prime, not tall, less than 1.7 meters, wearing a white robe, with light black hair on his head. He had a dignified demeanor, his features were just decent, his nose slightly hooked. In his blue eyes looking at Lumion was undisguised disgust and malice. This was Guillaume Benet, the local priest of the Eternal Sun Church in Colda village. I've been waiting for you for a while. Guillaume Benet said in a deep voice, did you deliberately bring those foreigners to the church? I thought you were sleeping inside. Lumion explained while discreetly stepping back. He recognized that standing next to Guillaume Benet was his brother, Ponce Benet. This guy was in his early 30s, in good shape, domineering, and liked to bully villagers. The others were his and the local priest's thugs. Seeing Lumion backing away, Guillaume Benet gave Ponce a look. Ponce Benet sneered and stepped forward. Bastard boy, come meet your daddy Ponce. Before he finished speaking, he had quickened his pace and lunged at Lumion, as did the other thugs. In a rural place like Colda village, reasoning doesn't work nor does it get apologies. Direct and aggressive handling is what earns respect. This, local priest Guillaume Benet was very clear about, and was accustomed to acting this way. So, as soon as he confirmed that the foreigners were brought to the church by Lumion, he decided to catch this kid and beat him up, beat him until he couldn't get out of bed for a month, beat him until someone compensated him. Of course, they had to avoid Orol.as for the law. All they had to do was tell Beast, the administrative officer and territorial judge, and the city's peace officer wouldn't come to the countryside for such a small matter as a fight, and Beast, as an outsider, wouldn't offend him, a locally born priest, without a significant conflict of interest. What made Guillaume Benet feel lucky was that the affair he had with Paulise, the wife of the administrative officer, was not made public by those foreigners, and the other side still didn't know. They were fast, but Lumion was faster. As soon as Ponce opened his mouth, he turned and ran. He knew all too well the nature and style of the local priest and his gang. Once, a villager informed the Eternal Sun Church in the city that Guillaume Benet not only had multiple mistresses, but also embezzled the congregation's dedication to the Eternal Sun, bullied people in the village at will, and did not behave like a clergyman at all. Later, one afternoon, the villager somehow fell to his death. Thump, 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 Lumion ran like the wind. Wait for your daddy. Ponce shouted as he chased, surprisingly not slow. The thugs followed closely, breaking out of the alleyway. Lumion didn't flee along the main road, but directly broke into the nearest house. The household was preparing lunch in the kitchen, which was also used as a living room, when suddenly a man ran in, with a swoosh. Lumion bypassed them and jumped out of the window at the back of the kitchen. By the time Ponce and the others chased in, the homeowner had come to his senses, stood up to block them, and started asking, what are you doing? What are you guys doing? Old man, get out of the way. Ponce rudely pushed the man aside, but it also delayed him a little. By the time they got to the window and jumped out, Lumion had already run into another alley. After another chase, they completely lost sight of Lumion. Damn wild dog. Ponce spat a wad of green phlegm on the side of the road. The two-story, semi-subterranean building stood before him. Lumion took a calming breath before nonchalantly opening the door to enter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. A rhythmic call echoed in his ears. Lumion glanced towards the open area on the other side of the kitchen, where he saw Oral, her blonde hair tied in a ponytail, dressed in a linen shirt, tight white trousers, and dark short boots made of lambskin, bouncing around and sweating profusely. The custom of the Colda village was that the majority of the ground floor was the kitchen, the heart of the home. This was where the cooking and dining occurred, and where guests were entertained. She's exercising again. Lumion was familiar with such scenes, not surprised in the least. Oral often did strange things without giving any reasons. At least exercising was a good thing, and it was quite a sight. Lumion moved closer to observe quietly. After a while, Oral stopped her workout, bent over, and turned off the battery-powered black tape recorder. She accepted the white towel Lumion handed over, and while wiping the sweat from her forehead, instructed, "Remember to learn combat this afternoon. Reading books, learning combat, aren't your expectations of me a bit high?" Lumion complained casually. Oral glanced at him, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Remember, our goal is comprehensive development in morality, intelligence, physique, aesthetic appreciation, and labor capacity." Her excitement grew as she spoke, as if recalling some delightful memories or amusing incidents that I've already failed in morality. Lumion grumbled silently. He then asked, "Which kind of combat?" One of the things that puzzled him was how the seemingly delicate Oral was actually a martial arts expert, mastering various styles of combat, always suppressing him to the point of helplessness. Oral thought seriously, leaned forward slightly, looked up at Lumion's eyes, and then laughed. "Self-defense against wolves." "Eh?" Lumion asked in surprise, "Isn't that for girls?" Oral stood up straight, shook her head solemnly, and said earnestly, "Boys also need to protect themselves when they go out. Who says boys won't encounter perverts?" The laughter at the corner of her mouth gradually became more apparent. Unsure whether his sister was joking or serious, Lumion remained silent, retrieved the white towel, and headed for the stairs. Suddenly, he felt a tightening under his foot, as if he had tripped over something, and he was sent tumbling forward. In midair, Lumion quickly tensed his abdominal muscles, extended his arms, pressed down on the chair beside him, and managed a somersault to land safely. Oral retracted her foot and chuckled. "One of the keys to combat is to always observe your surroundings, never be careless. Remember that, my rookie brother." Just now, her right hand had reached for Lumion's vest, but seeing him regain control, she pulled back. "Isn't that too much trust in you?" Lumion murmured. He thought about it and realized that such trust was meaningless. He had suffered from similar situations in front of Oral many times. Oral coughed, her expression becoming serious. "How was your conversation with that woman?" Lumion recounted the conversation roughly, ending with, "I plan to wait for your friend's replies before considering exploring the dream." "Wise choice." Oral nodded in approval. Lumion changed the subject. "What's for lunch?" "There are some leftover toasts from the morning. I'll grill you 4 lamb chops." Oral considered. "And you?" Lumion asked. "I'll just have a truffle bamboo chicken and a cheesy onion soup. I tried it last time, and found it quite—" She stopped mid-sentence, her entire body suddenly stiffening. The next second, she raised her hands, as if to cover her ears, her facial muscles gradually contorting. This distorted her beauty somewhat. Lumion watched silently, his eyes filled with concern and worry. After a while, Oral exhaled deeply and returned to normal. Sweat was again beading on her forehead. "What's wrong?" Lumion asked. Oral smiled. "My tinnitus is acting up again. You know I have this old problem." Lumion did not press further, instead saying, "Well, I'll cook lunch then, you rest." At times like these, his desire for extraordinary power became even more urgent and firm. Night, after dealing with a neighbor who had come to borrow the oven, Lumion ascended to the second floor, entering the room that served as his study. In the village of Cordu, many poor families didn't own an oven, nor a large stove. When they needed to bake bread or smoke meat, they had to borrow from others and use it on the spot. On this matter, Aurora had always been liberal and tolerant. Anyone could borrow, but they had to pay for the fuel or bring their own coal or wood. This time, she had already changed into a white silk nightgown and was curled up in a recliner. Under the bright desk lamp powered by a battery, she was engrossed in the book in her hands. Lumion didn't disturb her. He casually pulled a thin book from the bookshelf and sat down in a corner chair. "The Veil of Secrecy. What kind of magazine is this?" Lumion glanced at the cover filled with strange symbols, a question arising in his mind. He quickly flipped through it, becoming more and more astonished. This magazine talked about the existence of the human soul, the spirituality of all things, and how to communicate with different spirits in secret ways to gain different kinds of help, even if his faith was not devout, even if he just went with the flow and entered the Church of the Eternal Sun to make some prayers and occasionally participate in the Mass. Lumion couldn't help but think of 2 words: blasphemy. Taboo. Although it was normal for Aurora, a witch who would definitely be burned by the religious tribunal if exposed, to have such books at home, Lumion clearly saw that this magazine had a government publication permit. Could such a thing be published openly? Wasn't it said that the publication review was always strict? Or was this a forged permit? Lumion looked up at Aurora and asked, "Is this a banned magazine?" Aurora took her eyes off the book, glanced at her brother, and said nonchalantly, "It used to be considered underground literature, but later somehow it passed the review and was formally published. The Eternal Sun Church didn't care and let it be." "Literature?" Lumion didn't quite understand his sister's use of the word. "Of course it's literature. You didn't take it seriously, did you?" Aurora laughed. "If what's written is true, do you think it could be published? If you do as it says, apart from making yourself mentally weak and neurotic, you won't gain anything else. Occasionally there might be some truth to it, but without the corresponding ritual language, any attempts are in vain." This was the evaluation of a professional witch. Okay. Lumion couldn't hide his disappointment. I was just surprised that it could be published. Aurora puffed up her cheeks as if she was thinking hard. I'm not sure why, maybe in recent years, there have been more and more supernatural phenomena, and they can't all be hidden. This has brought about a certain trend of thought, and the government wants people to have a bit of understanding, so they relax the control over such books. In Trill, the more popular ones are the magazines Spiritual Communication, Lotus, and Mystery. I have them all on my bookshelf. If you're interested, you can find them and have a look. It might help you tell a more convincing story at the tavern. Okay. Lumion was indeed very interested. At the same time, he once again marveled. Aurora's collection of books is so diverse. It was thanks to these books and Aurora's occasional explanations that he, a dropout, could have a sufficient understanding of the world, the continent, and the country he lived in. This world had two continents, north and south, separated by the Furious Sea, which was plagued by hurricanes and difficult to navigate. As for the legendary eastern and western continents, no one had reached them yet, and no one could confirm whether they existed or not. Lumion and Aurora lived in the Intis Republic, located in the middle of the northern continent. It bordered the Phazak Empire to the north, looked across to the Rune Kingdom over the Onyx Mountains to the east, and was adjacent to the Kingdom of Fineport, Lundberg, and Maxi to the south. Between the Kingdom of Fineport and the Rune Kingdom, there were also small countries like Seagull. They, along with Lundberg and Maxi, were known as the Central Southern countries, sharing the common faith in the God of knowledge and wisdom. The southern continent had become a colony of the northern countries. Whether it was the Byron Empire, the Pass Kingdom, the Hagati Kingdom, or other countries, they had all lost most of their autonomy. Of course, the tide of anti-colonialism had never ceased. Apart from the Furious Sea between the northern and southern continents, there was the Misty Sea to the west of the Intis Republic, the Sunia Sea to the east of the Rune Kingdom, the Northern Sea to the north of the Phazak Empire, and the Polar Sea to the south of the southern continent. They were collectively known as the Five Seas. Among the countries of the northern continent, the Rune Kingdom was the most powerful, followed by the Intis Republic. The Phazak Empire, which lost the last war, fell to fourth place, and the Kingdom of Fineport rose to third. Among the central southern countries, Lundberg was the most prosperous, compared to the villagers of Cordu who only knew about the Intis Republic, the Kingdom of Fineport, and Lundberg. Lumion could be considered a geographer. Of course, this was because the shepherds of Cordu village needed to migrate to the nearby Kingdom of Fineport and Lundberg, so they had a certain understanding of these two countries. If it were the villagers of the northern region of Delaire, apart from the nearby villages, towns, and cities, they could only name Trill, Suet, and other major cities of their own country. Sometimes, Lumion really wondered how Aurora could master so much knowledge. All the textbooks he studied were compiled by Aurora, all the exercises were set by Aurora, and Aurora could answer any questions he had about the books he read. What's more important was that she also mastered various schools of martial arts. This was simply not something a 20-something-year-old girl could do. Some people couldn't accumulate so much knowledge even after living for 50 or 60 years. Could this be the basic requirement for being a real witch? Lumion looked up at Aurora again. Aurora was reading a book while gently tapping her cheek with her finger, not looking like a scholar or a witch at all. What are you looking at? Aurora noticed his gaze. You said last time that I have the knowledge to take the Unified Entrance Exam for higher education. Lumion changed the subject. Aurora thought for a moment and said, theoretically, you could get into any university, but I've never taken that entrance exam, so I can't be sure of the specific scope of the questions. Roselle is really harmful, sigh, but it's also a good thing. Without a doubt, the Unified Entrance Exam for higher education was something Roselle the Great had implemented during his reign, and it had continued to this day. Aurora suddenly remembered something, looked at Lumion, and asked with a smile, why didn't you go to the tavern to tell stories today? I'm not a real drunk. Lumion waved the magazine in his hand. Reading at home is also a good form of entertainment. And that calms me down, relaxes me, he added silently in his mind. Aurora nodded, then glanced at Lumion in the corner, saying, why are you sitting so far away? Are you trying to look pitiful, weak, and helpless? Come over here. Reading at night requires good light, otherwise it can damage your eyes. Aurora's strange words were indeed plentiful. I understand the individual meanings of the words pitiful, weak, and helpless, but they seem strange when put together, not like their usual usage. Lumion had long gotten used to Aurora's peculiarities. Picking up his chair, he moved it next to the desk under the bright desk lamp. He and Aurora sat side by side, quietly reading. Occasionally, they would exchange a few words. The sound of their breathing, the rustle of turning pages, and the occasional night breeze from outside the window created a calm and peaceful atmosphere. After bidding Aurora good night, Lumion returned to his room. He took off his coat and hung it over the back of his chair, making no attempt to bring the wand card to bed. This was to avoid arousing Aurora's suspicions, as she had said she would keep an eye on him at all times. As Lumion was About to walk towards his bed, he suddenly felt a change in his heart and stopped. He glanced around the room and adjusted his habitually tilted chair to face the window. Then, he climbed into bed and extinguished the oil lamp on the bedside table. After falling asleep normally, he suddenly jolted awake after an unknown period, fully conscious again. Once again, he saw his bedroom filled with a faint gray fog. Having prepared himself mentally, Lumion calmly looked around and noticed something. The chair he had intentionally straightened before going to bed was still tilted in his dream, retaining its usual appearance. In other words, the dream bedroom did not strictly correspond to reality. It might be a reflection of my deepest subconscious impressions. Although he was not sure what this meant, Lumion felt that it was worth remembering. He walked over to the window, leaned on the table with both hands, and looked outside. The red-brown mountain composed of reddish-brown stones and earth, as well as the collapsed buildings that surrounded it, once again caught his eye. The place was eerily silent. Time flew by quickly, and after some hesitation, Lumion finally made up his mind. Tonight, he would make a preliminary, definitive exploration, his past. Wandering life had given him a certain tenacity. He didn't immediately go downstairs and enter the ruins. Instead, he opened the closet and started to put on more clothes. This was not because he felt cold, but because he wanted to increase his defensive ability. In this way, after putting on a cotton jacket, cotton trousers, and a leather jacket, Lumion moved around a bit and felt that he could not add any more. Any more would significantly affect his agility. This was more important. As he was getting used to his current state, a thought suddenly flashed through Lumion's mind. This is my dream. Shouldn't I be able to have whatever I want? With a mindset of trying, he began to whisper to himself, I want a breastplate, a handgun. I want a breastplate, a handgun. The room, filled with a faint gray fog, remained unchanged. It seems it doesn't work. This dream is indeed special. Lumion composed his disappointment, opened the bedroom door, and stepped into the corridor. There was no light here, it was gloomy and dim. Lumion sequentially opened the doors to Aurora's bedroom and study. The arrangements inside were slightly different from reality, but mostly consistent. The biggest difference was that both scenes were devoid of Aurora, as if frozen in a gray mist. The first floor was the same. Lumion began to search for weapons to defend himself. With his knowledge of the house, he quickly found two options. One was a nearly 2-meter-long fork made of steel at the front end. According to Aurora, as long as the target doesn't have ranged weapons, this thing is definitely useful and effective. The second was a sharp, iron-black hand axe. The answer for an adult would be to take both. Lumion inexplicably thought of a phrase that Aurora often said, but in the end, he did not do so, because his plan for tonight was to make a preliminary exploration. What he needed was stealth and caution, almost like sneaking around, and carrying such a long weapon would undoubtedly slow him down and make him easily detectable. Lumion exhaled slowly, bent down, and picked up the axe. He then straightened up and walked towards the door step by step through the faint gray fog, without making a sound. He opened the front door. Stepping out the door, Lumion felt as if he had entered another world. No longer did he see the familiar village of Cordu, but instead, dark red mountains and a circle of collapsed buildings surrounding them, together creating a bizarre ruin. The fog in the high sky was thick and pale, with light barely penetrating. The ground was shattered and strewn with rubble. Lumion, axe in hand, proceeded cautiously, unable to find a spot to hide along the way. There was no undergrowth here, no trace of trees. Lumion walked somewhat fearfully, hunching his back for comfort, reassuring himself, at least if there were any dangers in this area, they would be immediately visible. Finally, he reached the ruins and stood before a partially collapsed building charred by fire. After observing for a while, Lumion was fairly certain there were no other creatures inside, so he cautiously entered, avoiding charred wood that could fall from the half-collapsed roof at any time, and began his search. His gaze swept across the room and landed on a corner where he saw a hint of gold peeking out from a broken clay pot. Lumion gradually moved closer and discovered it was a gold coin. Could this be real? He mumbled to himself as he picked up the gold coin and rubbed it on his clothes. The coin's engraving was revealed. On the front, it bore the face of a man with a thin face, hair parted on the side, a mustache, and a determined look in his eyes. On the back, a bunch of iris flowers surrounded the number 20. Lumion recognized the man. He was the first president of the Indies Republic, Levanx. It's a gold Louis. Lumion was quite surprised. He was surprised not only because the currency of the Real Indies Republic appeared in this bizarre dream ruin, but also because he had casually found such a valuable thing as a gold Louis. The current legal currency of the Indies Republic is for gold and cope. 1 for gold equals 100 cope. Cope exists in two forms, copper and silver coins. Copper coins are divided into 1 cope, 5 cope, and 10 cope, while silver coins are 20 cope and 50 cope. For gold can be silver coins, gold coins, or banknotes. Silver coins have 1, 5, 10 for gold, and gold coins are divided into 5, 10, 20, 40, 50. Banknotes have more denominations, including 5, 20, 50, 100, 200, 500, and 1000 for gold. In actual life, the people of Indies still use some old currency units. For example, they call the most widely used 5-cope copper coin Rick. Similarly, a gold coin worth 20 for gold is called a gold Louis. Of course, in the old currency system, the gold Louis was actually called gold Russell. After the establishment of the Republic, in order to eliminate the influence of Emperor Russell, it was changed to gold Louis. As far as Lumion knew, although it was not possible in the city, in a rural place like Corda village, a gold Louis could allow a poor family with their own field to live well for a month. If it were not for the decent income of a Loro, he might never have seen what a gold Louis looked like. In the entire Corda village, besides their siblings, only the priest's family and the administrative officer's family had seen and owned gold Louis. For any villager, this gold Louis would be a cherished gain. What a pity, this is just a dream. Lumion sighed, slightly disappointed in his heart. This does not involve anything extraordinary and most likely cannot be brought out of the dream. Even so, Lumion solemnly pocketed the gold Louis. His past life as a vagabond made him cherish every cope, and a gold Louis is equivalent to 2,000 cope, roughly equal to 1 gold pound of the Rune Kingdom. Of course, it's slightly less. According to the newspaper, 24 for gold can be exchanged for 1 gold pound. Lumion continued his search. He wanted to find some written materials to confirm the specific situation of the ruins, to see if this place corresponded to a real place, whether a village in the Indies Republic had been moved into the dream. The appearance of the gold Louis made Lumion have these guesses. As he moved step by step, Lumion saw a hint of dark red on the edge of what used to be a stove. Blood? His pupils dilated, quickly guessing that he then made a judgment. Although the blood was not fresh, it was not old either. It hadn't turned black and looked like it had just dropped a day or two ago. Or even shorter. At the same time as his heart tightened, Lumion felt the light around him suddenly dim. It was as if something had silently crawled over the half-collapsed roof, blocking the little light that penetrated the dense fog. The experience of being attacked during his wandering years flooded Lumion's mind like a surging wave, causing him to reflexively respond. He lunged forward, curled his body in midair, and rolled. When he landed, thump, something heavy fell behind him. Lumion rolled to the left side of the broken stove, pressed his hand on a stone, and turned his body with its help. He raised his axe and saw an additional figure where he had originally stood under the dim light. Lumion couldn't be sure whether it was a human or a humanoid creature. He was hunched over, without clothes or shoes. His skin seemed to have been peeled off, revealing red muscles, blood vessels, and yellowish fascia. A thick liquid was flowing on it but not falling to the ground. It was a monster. He had eyes that were more white than blue, as if embedded in his face. His mouth was wide open, his teeth were uneven, and saliva dripped from his mouth, stretching long. Over the years, Lumion had made up many ghost stories, but he didn't expect to encounter such a ghastly creature today. Hiss, the bloody wind hit him, and the panting sound entered his ears. Lumion instinctively dodged to the side, avoiding the attack of the bloody monster. If it hadn't been for Oloro's regular guidance, if he hadn't had years of combat learning and street fighting experience, he might not have been able to react in time due to the shock. Regaining his composure, Lumion took a step forward, raised his axe, and fiercely chopped it into the monster's back. Bang! The monster, who was about to turn around, was knocked to the ground, splashing pus and blood everywhere. Without hesitation, Lumion decisively knelt on one knee and raised his axe again. Thump! 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 He chopped several more times, each time deeply into the flesh, creating deep and wide cuts, disfiguring the monster's back of the head, neck, and back. Finally, the monster stopped struggling and lay still. You're not as terrifying as you look. Lumion sighed in relief, whispering with a hint of mockery. He wiped his face with his left hand, smearing it with blood. Is this monster's bodily fluid toxic? I'm not feeling any corrosive pain yet. Lumion began to worry about another issue. Just as he gathered his courage, preparing to search the monster's body, the skinless bloody creature propped itself up with its hands and sprang up violently. It's not dead yet, even after being hacked to such a state. It's still alive. Lumion was taken aback and terrified. He had to admit, he was scared. He was timid. If he were up against a normal human, beast, or monster, even if he couldn't beat them, he wouldn't be this afraid. But this creature in front of him seemed impossible to kill, making all his efforts futile. Taking advantage of the monster's apparent dizziness, unable to locate its enemy, Lumion acted decisively. He sprung to his feet, pushed off with his knees, and began to sprint. Thump! 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 He ran as fast as he could, but he could still feel a breath of air faintly spraying on his neck, and heavy panting echoed in his ears. The monster was hot on his heels. Lumion gritted his teeth, feeling as if fear had given him extra strength. He ran even faster, surpassing his previous record. To his delight, he found that the monster was not gaining on him. Thump! 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 Finally, Lumion arrived back at his semi-subterranean 2-story house. He pulled open the unlocked door and darted in. Bang! He slammed the door shut behind him. Without pausing for rest, Lumion rushed to the stove and grabbed the steel fork leaning against the wall. Then, he focused his gaze on the doorway. The sound of the monster's running disappeared nearby, but after a dozen seconds, it made no attempt to ram the door. Does it know I'm lying in wait here? Lumion couldn't believe the monster had a high degree of intelligence. He slowly moved to the window near the door and peeked out. Suddenly, a face appeared on the glass, a face without skin, bloody and mangled, with jagged teeth. Lumien's heart almost stopped, and he froze for a moment. The monster didn't take advantage of the situation to break the glass and attack. It just stared at Lumien. Lumien came to his senses, quickly backed away, and held up the long fork. The monster soon left the window area. Lumien watched and waited with extreme caution. He saw the monster wandering in the faint fog for a while, then it left his house and slowly returned to the ruins. Lumien was at a loss. He had been ready to trap the monster and wake up from the dream, but it just walked away. After pondering for a while, he thought of a possibility. Does the monster dare not enter my house? Yes, there's no sign of any damage inside. Is this an absolutely safe place in the dream? With this speculation, Lumien relaxed a bit. The next second, he felt an intense fatigue. Such a short chase was even more exhausting than an afternoon of fighting practice. With the fork and axe in hand, Lumien went up to the second floor, entered his bedroom, and tried to sleep. In a daze, Lumien opened his eyes. It was still dark outside the window, and the room was dim. If it weren't for the absence of the faint fog, and if he hadn't changed into his pajamas, Lumien wouldn't be able to tell whether this was reality or a dream. Did the shock wake me up? He instinctively reached into his pajama pocket and didn't find the gold Louis. This made him a little disappointed, confirming a fact once again: money indeed can't be taken out of the dream. Collecting his thoughts, Lumien started to ponder a serious issue: how to deal with the undead monster. Although he could avoid that area and sneak deeper, he still had to consider the possibility of encountering similar monsters in the future. He had to be prepared and couldn't gamble with his life.